Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker adamant he's going to appeal the Southern District of Illinois federal judge Stephen McGlynn's ruling that the state's gun and magazine ban is unconstitutional. That's after State Representative Dan Calkins said that the governor needs to drop the appeal, but the Illinois Attorney General as well saying that he's unapologetic about looking to appeal. Welcome in, Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. The legislature canceled today's session, so no veto session today, but still a lot to unpack from just the past couple of days. And let's go ahead and jump into Governor J.B. Pritzker celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Willard Ice Building. It's the Department of Revenue building here in Springfield. And it's interesting that while they celebrated the 40th anniversary, it was revealed that Governor Pritzker has not been inside the Revenue building for the nearly 6 years he's been in office, which is fascinating. I mean, it's just literally a 10-minute walk from the state capitol. It's, you know, the Department of Revenue where all the state's tax dollars flow through. So him not having been there, that being his first time yesterday for the 40th anniversary of the building, really interesting history there. I mean, Willard Ice, didn't know all the history he had, but he worked for the Department of Revenue for 35 years, even when it was called the Department of Finance. He was legally blind after the age of 4 after an accident, but, you know, climbed the ranks being a lawyer and a whole host of other things, advisors and whatnot. So the building was named after him. Just a little bit of history for you guys here in Springfield. But after that ceremony, the governor, he took to a mic rake, as we call it in the media, and he answered a slew of questions from members of the media. I'm going to kind of skip around here and just right up front into the media availability. I asked the governor about State Representative Dan Calkins saying that he needs to just drop the case. It's too much time and money being wasted on defending this law that a judge has said is clearly unconstitutional. So I asked the governor, why not drop the case?
Well, this is about protecting people's lives. So, no, I think that it's appropriate for us to fight for this law that the legislature passed, I might add, that I signed, and make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep people safe when they're in public, and in private too. And what we passed, frankly, is reasonable. It's nobody's grabbing anybody's guns, like the Republicans like to say. We're simply trying to keep people safe with the guns that are already out there and not add to the problem.
So,
yes, sir.
You know, again, fielding a ton of questions. He's adamant he's going to appeal that. But it wasn't the only question I asked. I also asked the governor a question about the incoming Trump administration and some of the things that he's already hinted he's going to do, including closing the Department of Education. And with education funding a top priority in Illinois, isn't that going to help?
We're going to have to address that.
Education funding is important. Your thoughts on Trump possibly ending the Federal Department of Education? Apparently he wants to return those dollars back to the states.
So think about all the people that you know who have gone through special education programs, all funded, I might add, by the federal government, who would lose out as a result of the decision to do that. Look, we've got a lot that the federal government is a part of. It's about 8 to 10% of most states' education budgets. And to take that away is literally going to be removing education from people who need it.
But he says he wants to return money back to the states.
Great, but what about, are we going to require that special education is a part of what school districts are offering? Because that is what the federal government has been doing, and frankly, we need more, not less.
I would imagine, though, that could be a policy that is enacted by the legislature to require that. Now, how much money would come back to Illinois if indeed the Department of Education, federal Department of Education, is closed? I'm not sure. I'm going to have to delve into that. But still, interesting to see that that's a proposal, and the governor's reaction is about whether or not there's going to be special education funding for such operations in Illinois. He was also asked about this. If you go to thecentersquare.com, you can read the quick hit about the governor building a coalition of sorts, a coalition to counter what you've got expected from the Trump administration. So this new coalition of governors Pritzker is creating, it's called the governor's safeguarding democracy. And they look to focus on things like abortion rights, strengthening democratic institutions, they say, all at the state level while you have an incoming Trump administration. The governor asked about that yesterday as well.
And so, we wanted to create a kind of a discussion ground, a place, a common ground for people to come to. By the way, Republicans and Democrats, to talk about how to deal with the changes that are coming and what we need to maybe protect against, and also, how it is that we might work with the administration. It's clear Donald Trump won. He won the popular vote by more than 2%. I wouldn't call that a landslide, but it was certainly a victory. And it's clear that his administration is going to have the ability to make changes and proposals. And so we're just here, as the state of Illinois, having to deal with whatever those changes may be.
So that's a big question that's been floating here at the State House during veto session. What's the legislature going to do in a Democrat-controlled state to counter any kind of Trump administration priorities that may run counter to Democrat initiatives? The question has been asked across the board, and there hasn't really seemed to be any major urgency right off the bat. But even Governor Pritzker saying that, there might be some things that they need to do, but they don't see necessarily anything that needs to happen right before January 20th, before Trump takes office.
There isn't anything that I can name you right now. I'm sure that in the discussions that I'm having with the General Assembly, members of the General Assembly, as well as with other governors, things will pop up over the next, little while. But it's not something that I think that we'll have to address during this veto session. I haven't heard anything that has to be addressed right now during this veto session. Having said that, there is time to be able to do that before the January 20th inauguration.
So again, the governor fielding a ton of questions there. You can hear members of the media trying to shout each other out. It's kind of how it goes when you've got 15 members of the media in limited time and people shouting questions all over the place. But fast forwarding a bit later on in the day, House Republicans held a news conference. And House Republican State Representative Ryan Spain from the Peoria area, he talked about the things, while Democrats are saying, well, we're not sure what needs to happen yet to counter a Trump administration. Ryan Spain saying, well, we already know a whole host of things that the legislature can do in Illinois to pair up with Trump administration policies.
Problems. Our immigration policies in the state of Illinois have been a mess. They've led to out-of-control spending that have placed priorities in the wrong place in terms of healthcare spending and asylum assistance. We need to fix that, and it's something that the federal government will be working on very intently. We need to resolve and reduce our high energy prices in the state of Illinois that have been delivered through green climate initiatives that the governor has focused on, but they've had a consequence of driving up utility bills all throughout the state of Illinois. We need to be preparing ourselves for the expiration and the redrafting of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Remember, in 2017, tax reform was passed by Congress. It expires next year. In Illinois, we have spent that time decoupling ourselves from the federal tax code in order to create additional revenue gimmicks, as Leader McCombie talked about, to pad the state budget. We need to recouple with the federal tax code so that any of the changes that are made to facilitate economic growth can actually benefit us here in the state of Illinois, whether that's changing our estate tax, our depreciation laws, the way we do and offer operating loss carry forwards. We've made deliberate decisions in the state of Illinois to move away from those policies at the federal level. It's time to rejoin so that we can benefit from economic growth that needs to take place. And if I were Governor Pritzker, I would be reaching out to President Trump saying, how can we work to restore our SALT deductions for the state of Illinois that could provide property tax assistance, which is repeatedly one of the main issues that we hear about again and again from our constituents. And we also need to be preparing ourselves from the likely adjustments for not taxing tips and overtime wages. These are the things that we should be working together on now to prepare ourselves for new realities in Washington, D.C. It's time to put away the bluster, stop the macho man routine, and figure out how we can actually work together. Speaking of macho man, one more thing We have heard from the last several years and watched as a systematic disenfranchisement of Republican districts has taken place.
And this is something that Republicans have complained about quite a bit, is they see tax dollars being distributed more to Democrat districts than Republican districts. So maybe that's a story for another time. But just interesting to hear, the governor say there's not much that we need to focus on, at least that we know of now, to counter the Trump administration, while the Republicans, while they're in the super minority at the State House and will remain in the super minority with the new General Assembly that's seated mid-January, you've got Republicans saying, look, we know things we need to do. We need to recouple with the federal tax code to benefit from the potential extension of the Trump tax cuts from 2017. We need to focus on the estate tax and how we can lower property taxes and get state and local tax deductions. We need to focus on how to best conform with the possibility of no taxing on tips or no taxing on overtime, things that Trump has said he's going to work to implement. So interesting to see kind of that contrast there. But back to the governor, during his news conference, he was asked about why should people not think that you're running for president in 2028?
Why should anyone think that you are not running for president in 2028?
That's kind of funny. I mean, first of all, it's 2024. I still have 2 years left to serve in the term that I'm in as governor. As you all have heard me say time and time again, I love this job, and there's an awful lot about it that I believe I can do to protect people from, the problems that seem to want to come from Washington, D.C. over the next 2 years. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And again, you all should, and you've been asking me about re-election. I think that's the relevant conversation to have.
So obviously, he says the relevant conversation is 2026, not 2028. We'll be watching that closely and see what happens. Be sure to get it all here with Illinois in Focus Daily. Subscribe to America's Talking Network on YouTube. Get the newsletter at thecentersquare.com for all the latest headlines. And get the podcast where you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus.